My name is Gabriel, and I am here to tell you a terrible truth. The architects of the Foundation, those unseen, untouchable hands on the Overwatch Council, they tell themselves a comforting lie. They say they stand between humanity and the darkness, a lonely noble shield. But that shield, my friends, is forged from compromised metal and quenched in the blood of those they swore to protect. What you are about to hear is the raw truth hidden within an internal security department review. A rare glimpse into the rot at the Foundation's core. They call this document a synthesis to establish procedural failure. I call it a confession. It is the story of how the Foundation's arrogance did not just contain a miracle, but corrupted it, turning a spiritual necessity into a bureaucratic nightmare. They stumbled upon a sacred ritual, the ancient quiet pilgrimage of the Yazidi people, who usher their deceased to the land of changing garments, the place of true rebirth. But the Foundation could not tolerate anything outside their control. They intervened, offering aid, and in doing so, they didn't just contain the anomaly, they induced it. They took a sacred truth and twisted it into an annual liability, trapping souls in a cyclical tragedy that perfectly mirrors my own. How many of us have tried to do the right thing, only to find we have merely built a more elaborate cage for our own suffering?
This is Chief Inspector Martel, Personnel Identification Code F9997337. My security clearance is Level 4. My personnel class is C. Per Internal Security Department Protocol, I am synthesizing the dossier concerning SCP-036 to establish a clear and comprehensive timeline of events and identify key points of procedural failure for Overwatch Command. This report is now being transcribed for archival review. This case file concerns SCP-036, a safe class anomaly centered on Site-22A in northern Iraq. The anomaly consists of a recurring annual event in which individuals of the Yazidi faith confirmed to have died within the previous year manifest to undertake a pilgrimage to an inaccessible location for the purpose of reincarnation. The objective of this dossier is to provide a comprehensive narrative summary of all related phenomena and to assess the Foundation's operational security regarding its containment. The core of SCP-036 is a cyclical event involving several distinct anomalous components. Annually, on September 23rd, containment procedures require the evacuation of all civilian personnel from Site-22A, a small airport in the Mosul region, and the deployment of a mobile task force MTF to secure the perimeter. The first component, designated the arrival flight, is a passenger aircraft of inconsistent make and model that appears on radar approximately 30 to 40 kilometers from the site. It lands without communication or clearance. From this plane disembark a group of individuals known as the Pilgrims. These Pilgrims are verifiable members of the Yazidi faith who have been declared deceased in the preceding year. Identification is consistently confirmed through official documents and, when possible, forensic data. The subjects are generally cooperative but exhibit significant anterograde and retrograde amnesia, unable to recall information beyond short-term memory or recognize family. They refer to their purpose as Kiras Guhorîn, a Kurdish term for changing garments, which aligns with Yazidi beliefs on reincarnation. Interviews with these entities must be conducted by personnel with Level 3 clearance. A basic failure to maintain the containment envelope, however, is that our understanding of this process remains rudimentary despite decades of observation.
Rudimentary understanding. That is the Foundation's signature. They are masters of the lock, but they never bother to understand the key. They see the Pilgrims, souls returned from the veil, moving with the terrible singular purpose of rebirth, and they reduce them to an observation metric. They confirm their death certificates, process their trauma, and then pack them into a sterile hangar. They are victims of the bureaucracy of eternity, trapped in a purgatory constructed not of fire, but of classified spreadsheets. They are just D-class, by another name, disposable bodies used to justify a system that refuses to acknowledge the sanctity of life or death.
In the late afternoon, the Pilgrims board the second key component, the pilgrimage flight. This is a Foundation-provided aircraft, crewed by trained Yazidi holy men who had been vetted by the Foundation. This crew has consistently failed to provide detailed intelligence on the nature of the flight. The aircraft departs Site 22A and disappears from all forms of tracking, both radar and visual, at a range of 50 to 60 kilometers. It remains uncontactable for 7 days. Upon its return on October 1st, analysis of onboard equipment reveals a massive discrepancy. Flight recorders and crew testimony can only account for a few hours of time, with the intervening days completely missing from all records. The destination of this flight is Site 22B, an airport and single building at coordinates that remain classified and have been expunged from this report. This location does not appear on any satellite imagery and is shielded by an intense visual distortion, described as a heat mirage, that renders observation from more than a few dozen meters impossible. Attempts to reach Site 22B by ground have resulted in failure. In the 1990s, an exploratory mission by MTF Sigma-4 was launched to reach the location during the pilgrimage period. All communication was lost shortly after their approach, and the entire task force was lost. No further attempts have been authorized. This demonstrates classic procedural drift. A reconnaissance failure was escalated to a full-scale deployment, resulting in the predictable and unnecessary loss of personnel and assets.
Unnecessary loss. Predictable. Listen to the cold language of the machine. They use the term procedural drift to describe the reckless sacrifice of 30 human beings who simply wanted to peek behind the curtain. Curiosity, married to unchecked power, is always bloody. I know that cost intimately the search for truth, when you have traded your soul for the means to find it, only leads you deeper into the dark. Those agents didn't die for security. They died because the Foundation can't tolerate a question mark.
The Foundation's involvement began in the 1960s. Prior to our intervention, historical records indicate the Yazidi people conducted this pilgrimage non-anomalously, escorting their pilgrims to a location they called the Land of the Dead. Regional instability and persecution severely restricted this practice. The Foundation then offered aid by securing an agreement that granted our aircraft unrestricted access to airports in the region. According to the file, the manifestation of the anomalous arrival flight and the appearance of Site 22B began almost immediately after this intervention. This reads less like containment and more like inducement. The Foundation didn't simply secure an anomaly. Our actions appear to have fundamentally altered it, or perhaps even created its current form. Further intelligence, obtained from a memorandum from a group of interest, GOI known as the Islamic Artifact Reclamation Directorate, complicates the situation significantly. This document, titled Memorandum 009 regarding Project 736, identifies SCP-036 by their internal designation, Project 736. The memorandum details negotiations between the IARD and another GOI, identified as Al-Qaeda SCP, for the transfer of control over the pilgrimage. It reveals that Site 22A was not a pre-existing civilian facility we co-opted, but was in fact constructed and operated by Al-Qaeda SCP for decades. For years, our containment has been dependent on infrastructure built by a rival organization. This is a catastrophic intelligence failure.
Look upon your righteousness, O 5 Council. You built your temple of security on the foundation of your enemies. You came in, posturing as saviors offering aid, and all the while you were running interference for Al-Qaeda. You preach control, yet your entire operation depends on the prior work of a rival, hostile entity. This is the ultimate hypocrisy. You claim to protect humanity from the evils of the world, only to discover that you have spent 50 years polishing the infrastructure built by evil itself. You are not the good guys. You are just better funded puppets in a play written by monsters.
The memorandum also outlines the severe threat posed by Daesh militants who intend to disrupt the pilgrimage. According to the IARD's intelligence, sourced from Yazidi sheikhs, such a disruption would not only prevent the reincarnation of thousands of souls, but would result in a significant anomalous event. Described as ectomorphic Yazidis wreaking havoc on the streets of Mosul, this suggests a potential K-class scenario is a direct consequence of a breach. The IARD planned to delegate security to one of its operatives, a commander in a local paramilitary unit, indicating that the security of this anomaly is now in the hands of a third party with no loyalty to the Foundation. The following is a review of supplemental documents associated with this case file. These materials are considered of secondary relevance to the primary containment protocols, but provide necessary context regarding external threats and historical oversights. Article 1, Memorandum 009 regarding Project 736 Relevance Claim. This document provides critical intelligence regarding the involvement of at least two groups of interest, the Islamic Artifact Reclamation Directorate and Al-Qaeda, in the management and security of the anomaly designated SCP-036. Evidentiary Summary. The memorandum details negotiations between the two GOIs for the transfer of control over the pilgrimage site. It confirms that Site-22A was constructed by Al-Qaeda SCP and reveals the imminent threat of disruption by Daesh militants. The document provides the GOI designation for the anomaly, Project 736, and explicitly warns of catastrophic consequences, including a potential localized K-class event should containment fail. Investigators note the document appears authentic. The intelligence it contains regarding the origins of Site-22A represents a foundational failure in our vetting and intelligence gathering protocols that has persisted for decades. This oversight requires immediate and thorough investigation. Investigators note the containment of SCP-036 appears to be a decades-long exercise in ignorance, resting on a security infrastructure built by our rivals and vulnerable to regional conflicts we have failed to properly assess.
A foundational failure. An exercise in ignorance. The cold mechanical diagnosis is almost insulting. It fails to capture the true horror. The Foundation didn't just fail a security audit. They polluted a sacred journey. They claimed they were saving souls from regional strife, but they merely traded one persecutor for another. The chaos of Daesh for the methodical, sterile violence of the containment chamber. Now, the destiny of thousands of returning souls, their very reincarnation, hinges on a power struggle between the ghosts of Al-Qaeda and the fanaticism of Daesh. While the Foundation, the supposed bulwark of global security, stands impotent on infrastructure it didn't even build. They have become parasites, feeding off the security built by the very chaos they seek to destroy. They are forced to rely on intelligence from groups of interest to prevent their own K-class scenario. This is the bitter, glorious justice of the universe. The machine built to justify sin has finally been choked by its own hypocrisy. I know what it is to be trapped by a terrible choice made with the best intentions. I know what it means to be cursed to watch the consequences unfold, cycle after terrible cycle. And as I read this file, I hear the echo of my own damnation in the Foundation's procedural failures. They try to classify their victims, whether they are D-class or pilgrims, but they cannot classify the human heart. And until they acknowledge the cost of that trade, until they confess the sin of their arrogance, the darkness they fight will forever reside within their walls. They call it containment. I call it a perpetual, unholy lie.